Hello and welcome to Newsclick. Today we are going to discuss about the 6 nuclear reactors that the Westinghouse will build in India. This was recently announced after Modi's visit to USA. To discuss the issue we have with us Prabir Purkayastha, Editor-in-Chief of Newsclick and an energy expert. Welcome to Newsclick, Prabir. So the headlines claim that this is the start of preparatory work has been a massive achievement for the Indian government. Is it actually an achievement, or what are the truths about these achievements?
Well, it's a very interesting issue because if you remember, this was the achievement supposedly reached in 2008 when Westinghouse was supposed to build these reactors in Mithivirdhi in Gujarat, and 6 other reactors were offered for buying by the government of India in the same location as has been now promised to Westinghouse to GE. That was the General Electric offer which was supposed to have been made, and that's what we were going to do. So we're going to get 12 reactors in all, 6 in Mithivirdhi and 6 in Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh. So essentially we don't seem to have gone anywhere further in the last 8 years. Instead of GE, now the site has been offered to Westinghouse, presumably because actually GE has pulled out of this. GE doesn't want to pursue this further. So now this site has been offered to Westinghouse. It's in that sense the restart of what was done 8 years back, because Mithivirdhi site proved very difficult due to various reasons, and therefore it's really coming back to 8 years back where it was. So the clock has been restarted from where it was 8 years back. So I don't see this as anything major, anything new, or it's as a great achievement. It's just something which was decided some time back. And this one also says start of preparatory work, which means Westinghouse doesn't know the site. They'll have to see what the site is, estimate what the cost is going to be, is the site suitable for the reactors, and then they are supposed to close this agreement by another year or so. We have seen the Ariva negotiations. They have been going on for 6 or 7 years. We have seen also earlier negotiations. So I would put a serious question mark whether we could reach an agreement in 1 year, as this announcement seems to claim.
Probably in an article that you have written for Newsclick, you also claim that this is a dying technology. And the nuclear reactors, what is the usefulness of these reactors? Have they been used anywhere else across the globe, or are they actually useful in terms of the cost that is being paid for it?
So 2 different issues really. How stable is this technology? Has it been used anywhere? What's the status of nuclear technology today? And second is the cost. I'll come to the second question later. You see, nuclear has been a difficult technology. Let's face it, this has never been easy. Yes, we had built a number of reactors, particularly in the US, in France, in UK, in Russia, Japan. A number of reactors have been built. More or less, all of them have some similar problems. One is the technology, as we learn more about it, seems to require much more investments than we originally thought. So one of the problems with the nuclear industry has been that the continuous escalation of costs and also overruns in terms of time. So one of the reasons nuclear reactors, after the nuclear weapons program had reached a certain size and fissile material was available, so nuclear weapons ceased to be any reason for the nuclear reactors. By itself, the power reactors generating nuclear energy or electricity did not really prove very economical. And main reason it did not prove economical is it took much longer to build, and the cost was also going to be relatively higher. So it was not really the Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island that killed the nuclear industry. It was more or less killed by the cost and time overruns. So that's been one part of the nuclear industry. It's the only technology I know whose costs have increased the more we learn about it. Normally it's the other way around. Nevertheless, nuclear can still claim that it has a role, it produces base load, and therefore if you look at greenhouse emissions, it can replace coal. So that's an argument that can be given by the nuclear industry. It was given, and it did have some traction. That's why the whole talk about the nuclear renaissance came about 10-15 years back. So 2 things have happened. One is the cost of what the reactors were supposed to be, which at the time was talked about as something which was maybe a little higher than coal, but not significantly higher than coal. Somewhere which would be in Indian terms about 8 to 10 crores per megawatt was the argument given. In India, for instance, the Indian entity Nuclear Power Corporation, does build reactors at this cost with Indian technology. So it was argued that the similar cost is what we would see if we also get the reactors from West, essentially from France and US. The Areva negotiations showed that these costs are not realistic. They are in fact much higher. Various reasons for it, I'm not going to go into that today, but various reasons show that the time overruns and the cost overruns, what plagued the nuclear industry earlier, still continues. We have the one reactor in Finland, one reactor in France, which are being built by Areva, and both have run into very similar problems. The cost overruns have been almost that of, almost 3 times what the original cost was. So these are the other parts of what is the problem. But the second part of the problem is also these are all unproven, untested reactors. They're being built for the first time, both in China and in the US. There are 2 reactors, 2 sites where these reactors have been built in China. Similarly, 2 places where they're building in the United States. All of them have seen time overruns. All of them have seen major problems with the equipment. So they had to be rebuilt, particularly some of the pumps which are integral to the reactor had to be rebuilt. So all of that shows that it's an unproven, untested technology still. They're being called as 3rd generation, but none of the 3rd generation reactors have proven successful as yet. So to me, it's an open question whether these reactors are really going to do what they say. Is it going to be safer as they claim? And in spite of the huge overrun of cost, will we get something which is usable and will not blow up? Of course, the second reason, as you know, the problem is the Fukushima disaster, which also made clear that a nuclear accident has huge consequences. The cost of cleaning up Fukushima is still going on and it's going to go on for 40-50 years, and those costs are huge and is not borne by the company which actually owned the reactor, but it's really borne by the Japanese people. This is apart from the fact that people have to abandon their farms, their houses and so on. You can cost it in economic terms, so the cost otherwise is quite high. So these are some of the issues that we have to take into account. Coming back to the cost of the Westinghouse reactor itself, if we look at what the costs are in the United States, if we use that as a benchmark, original costs, not the revised costs which might have taken place because there has been a 3-year overrun in terms of the building schedule. We do not know how much further it's going to slip. Leaving that out, the original cost was roughly about $7 billion per reactor. At that cost, the 6 reactors, I've done a simple back of the envelope calculation, it comes to 2,80,000 crores. Even if we reduce the cost, even if we do various things, this is the ballpark figure. So we are looking at a minimum 12 to 14 rupees is the cost of electricity. I think that's a very high price to pay.
Probably if you look at Areva or even the Westinghouse, both the companies are near to end in most of the countries in the world. Most of the countries are closing down the nuclear reactors. So why is India continuously pushing towards this move, and when especially the current Prime Minister talks about Make in India?
It's a difficult question again, what's in the mind of the Indian policy makers. Yes, in the West, nuclear energy seems to be coming to an end. There are few countries which are still talking about building nuclear reactors, but they are mostly either in the developing countries, or it's in the erstwhile Eastern European set of countries, the socialist bloc, which have a good shall we say, infrastructure of a nuclear industry. So Russia has nuclear reactors, it is still building, and some of the Eastern European countries are also going in for some more investment in nuclear reactors. I'm not going to write off the nuclear industry completely. I do believe that yes, if costs are competitive, nuclear reactors can be safe. I'm not taking into account the cost of storing radioactive wastes that are generated from the nuclear industry. I'm leaving that question out, the cost and the risk of storing it. But otherwise, taking other things into consideration, it might be possible to consider nuclear industry as competitive. It doesn't seem so if you want to import Westinghouse or Areva reactors. If you want to build an indigenous nuclear industry, incorporate some of the 3rd generation technologies that are involved, collaborated with Russia, collaborated with China. It's possible to think of upgrading our indigenous nuclear industry and bring it up to what's called the third generation nuclear technology. Doesn't seem to possible to do it with Ariba as well as Westinghouse. So the reason government of India seems to want to put in the 6 reactors is more as a payback to the United States. To revive Westinghouse is a dying concern otherwise.
Prabir, the nuclear companies in the USA are claiming that the liability during this agreement seems to be quite high for them, while the Indian government seems to have offered some off-the-record assurances. So do you think the Indian government is trying to amend its Nuclear Liability Act?
It's an interesting question. Why companies like Westinghouse, which claim their reactors are completely safe, are so worried about liability? If the reactors are not safe, of course they should be worried. If it is safe as they are claiming, they shouldn't be worried about liability. Secondly, the liability is not unlimited. Liability is capped at 1500 crores. Now 1500 crores compared to the size of the reactor bill, which is what we are talking about, is the range of 2,80,000 crores, is a very small liability, even if it is half that cost. Even then, 1,40,000 crores say. Compared to that, the total liability is only 1500 crores. The Liability Act actually caps the operator's liability at 1500 crores, and if it is capped at 1500 crores, they cannot raise a liability bigger than 1500 crores on the suppliers. The supplier's liability is limited to the operator's liability. So why they should be worried about a 1500 crore liability when they are going to supply 1,40,000 crore equipment is a complete question mark in my mind. I don't really understand it. It seems they want to have complete impunity. We should be allowed to supply huge reactors at huge prices, and we should have no liability. So it's not a liability regime that they're worried about, but that they want no liability regime. That's what they're looking for. The government of India, it seems, has given assurances otherwise, off the record. The assurances that have been given seems to be, will create an insurance pool which will cover all the liability, and therefore we will take care of your liability. Now the risk of all this is then, if you have a no liability regime, there is absolutely no way you can ensure that the company supplying the equipment then will be concerned about the safety of these reactors, because they have no liability. They can supply and shut down for all you care, and that's it. They have absolutely nothing to worry about. So this has always been, after Bhopal, a very serious issue in India. We had the Union Carbide, we had the largest industrial disaster. For in India to have a no liability regime is not something the Indian people would be quite happy, would accept very easily.
Probably the insurance pool that you are talking about, it would be the public funded insurance companies that will take over.
That's right. It is planned to be Indian insurance companies backed by the Indian government. That's supposedly the insurance pool that is being set up. It's been set up now for private Indian companies. It's also presumed will cover also all the American companies, so they will have no liability. That was one of the sticking points, and this seems to be, as I said, off the record deal that has been offered. We have to see what really transpires.
Thanks a lot for giving us your time, Prabir, and as the things proceed, we'll be coming back to you on such issues. Thank you for watching Newsclick.